Hello there, and welcome to the surge coverage of the SUSU elections for 2022. I'm joined by the education and democracy candidates for this year, and we're going to give them an interview and meet them. Let's start with a little rundown of who you all are and why you're particularly keen to put your candidacy forward this year. So should we start down this end with Holly?
Yeah, I'm just really passionate about education. I've had a lot of experience in the 2 years I've been here with a lot of students coming forward to me who've are disabled and have just a lot of issues, and it's quite difficult seeing students who don't feel like they are represented and don't know where they can get representation. And that's one of the few things that's really pushed me forward to run, because I've had some representation experience in the role of social, economic and political science school president. And I feel like I've been able to do a lot of really good there to make sure that students are represented properly, but I'd like to be able to take that to a higher level.
I'm Ryan. I'm a fourth year biomed, and I'm current faculty officer of FELS. And I've had 4 years of education experience from course rep, school president, faculty officer, and I've basically had a lot of people say you should run again. So I'm running again. I'm passionate about making change and making sure people's voices are heard. And I'll pass on to Nicola.
Hi, my name is Emily. I decided to run because I started this thing called the Partnership for Education Reform last year, which was to increase discussions about race, culture and ethnicity in education, because I saw that was a real gap in our undergraduate programme. And I realised as I'm getting to the end of my degree that, if I don't stay on, or if I don't pass this on to somebody else, pass the baton on, it's not going to get done, because no one else is really going to take up that mantle, because it's hard. It's really difficult to push for change and to advocate for yourself and for others. So I just was like, I'm going to put my name forward, and hopefully the students decide that I'm the best person to advocate for them.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm a third-year history student. Like everyone else here, I'm passionate about education and democracy, but over the last 3 years of being here, I've been struck by how people don't necessarily know and get involved with the democratic system here, and how the current VP has worked really hard to change that, get more people involved, get new ways to engage with it. And I just really I'm driven to want to carry that on and continue the hard work and get more people involved. And on the education side, I studying here for 3 years, I've seen and heard from other people the different problems, especially with the times of COVID, and just, as Holly said, with the issues particularly disabled students face. And it makes me passionate about making change to these things.
Hi, I'm Parth. I'm a fourth year student, and I've got 4 years of academic rep experience. I've been a course rep, a school department president and a faculty officer, and during that time I think I've managed to make strong connections with senior staff at the university, but also at SUSU, which allows me to be in a very good position to campaign and fight for things that I think are realistic, but also very idealistic, and really focus on making plans that people can carry on and pass down the line, rather than specifically things which may take a long time, maybe too idealistic.
That's really great. So I think we'll start with something a little bit more general about what you guys think about the union as a whole, and then we'll get into the more nitty-gritty of education democracy. So what would you say is something that you think SUSU already does particularly well, that you particularly like about SUSU, and what's something that you think you'd really like to see change or that could really be improved? Should we start with Parth and work our way back down?
Yeah, I think the main thing that SUSU does really well is provide lots of opportunities for lots of different groups of people. I think the main issue, though, however, is that a lot of people don't know that there are lots of opportunities that you can take at SUSU and things like that. So I think it's really about making sure that campaigning that the SUSU does and advertising and sending out emails is very, very targeted to certain students. I think it needs to be realistic in its how it approaches students, because lots of students might be, may not have enough time to engage or may want to read like a full email or something like that. So I think the main thing that SUSU needs to work on is specifically engaging students and making sure everyone realizes that it's very, very accessible. And I think one thing that I'm looking forward to doing if I get elected is looking at the democratic processes that we have right now and seeing how we can change it to make it more accessible, but also more visible, which I think is really, really important.
Or sort of on a similar line, really, I think a lot of the things SUSU do at the moment are very good, but it's not a new problem that often student unions struggle with communicating to people why they should get involved and making it as easy as possible to get involved. So we would need to, I think a good way to do this would be to better target first years. Obviously, there's a lot going on when you first arrive, but it is so important to get people involved with the democratic structures as soon as they're here, so that they sort of have that inbuilt for their whole uni experience and they can remain involved.
Hi, I'm going to think what SUSU does well is that we have, I think, a solid foundation. I think we've got a great structure in terms of democracy and student voice. However, I don't think it's utilised very well. I don't think people understand what the course representative role is. What does it mean to be a president of a programme? And they don't really understand either, and it's due to kind of communication and visibility about what kind of support there is in terms of academic support. I'm glad that the Student Hub was set up, that there's kind of like a one-stop shop for in terms of student well-being and all, and I think that's great. And I think maybe a similar thing could be done here at SUSU, where there's a kind of a one-stop shop for academic concerns as well. And you could get, whether that's in an informal discussion about assessment and like you're really worried about it, or whether it's raising an issue of actually an act of discrimination, and that you want to raise that, in a confidential but supportive manner to somebody.
Similar to Emily, I think that one thing SUSU does really well is there are a lot of people working behind the scenes to make sure minor concerns are dealt with, and there's a lot of people that work in that, not just from course reps all the way up to faculty officers, SABs, but also in all the other student officer roles, so like halls officers, all of them, they all work fantastically well to produce responses that students want. But I feel a lot of those minor concerns are overlooked quite a bit, and that is something I would really like to see improved on, just so people know that their voices do have a voice, do matter, and that they have had change, even if it is in the minor scheme of things.
I think the student union's really good at pushing activities. Like, I know so many students love like freshers, and unfortunately with freshers isn't as popular, but I think a lot of students do view the student union as a really good place to have fun, relax, and like go to places if you want activities. But unfortunately, I don't think the reliance on the student union is as strong within the representative structure, because most people don't know what the student union, like when the university is talking about students and trying to get students' opinions, they mean they've talked to the student union. But the student union doesn't know what students want unless course representatives are strong. And unfortunately, a lot of students, especially in first years and because of COVID, aren't aware that student like representatives are at the absolute forefront, and you should have them. And we need to make sure that like every single course has some, because in my current department, only like 2 courses have course representatives, and it's really difficult to collect all that information and feed it back up to like the student union and then up to the university if students aren't aware that course representatives do things and they are really important and they do actually play an active role instead of just being there to have a chat. And I think it's difficult. I would definitely like push for more advertising of like what course representatives do, and regular emails about like what your course representative's doing, what they've done, and how they've helped you throughout your university experience, because otherwise students just don't know.
I noticed it's very interesting. You've all talked about representation and about communication between students. So we'll go into probably the big hitter that is the elephant in the room here, which is obviously we had January exams, which were subject to a lot of controversy. So how are you going to help guide students and represent their concerns to the uni as we transition back to in-person exams in the summer and onwards? So maybe we'll start with Emily here, just to mix it up a bit.
Yeah, it's really tough. I answered a question on this, and I think it got asked to all of us about, like, what would you do if you had to tackle it as VP Ed Dem? And I said that I think, listening to Ben, I think that we need to have more student representation on the University Executive Board. Currently, Ben is the only person, or the union president is the only person. So you're literally a minority trying to advocate for thousands of students. And as we know, one person's kind of perspective and opinion isn't really enough for a diverse group of students. And that leads to a larger issue of sometimes the university treating students as a homogenous group, as if we all think the same thing and if we all have the same reasons. I mean, the 90% vote, that was all a very clear mandate, but everybody who put in their vote, they all had different reasons for doing so. They all had different experiences or backgrounds that led them to put forward that vote, and those need to be addressed and those need to be heard. So I think that is one way to kind of deal with it. But also, I mean, the latest higher education guidance came out today about COVID, and I noticed that in the guidance, it says that institutions are expected to involve staff and students in the communication of guidance. And so I kind of messaged Lottie James, the current VP, and I was like, what do you think the university means by involvement? Because the kind of perspective you have on what involvement means could mean anything from Lottie sharing it on her Facebook, like this is what they've decided, or actually having a survey for all students, taking that survey, discussing it with staff and students. You know, there's different levels to involvement, and I think that definitely needs to be addressed with university executives about how much they want to hear our voice, and are they going to act on our voice once it's heard.
Goes Jamie.
With the petition about exam safety and the level of support that had, I think it just shows that there needs to be some change there. The university need to realise that petitions with this level of support, they need to have more power, and the fact that it was followed up with open letters from the union president, and it's still failed to sort of have the outcome that was asked for by the vast majority of students. It shows that the university needs to give more power to the petitions, so that they are following what the student population wants and not just what a handful of sort of senior leadership want. And then on the transition to back to exams after COVID, as it's ending now, with the in terms of restrictions, we really need support on the skills for exams. I was talking to some of the other candidates here earlier about the difficulties of exams at uni and how we all feel really we aren't prepared for this at the moment. There needs to be support for every student available to help us with exams. There needs to be skills workshops on this, and I know the current VP, Lottie, is working on introducing some life skills and other skills workshops in the future, and this should really be an integral part of that moving forward, exam skills, along with other areas such as digital skills, from the way that COVID has changed how education works, and there is a much larger digital component, as there is in the world of work, and so students need to be prepared for this.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I very much agree with the decision, well, the action that they've taken, Ben and Lottie, to specifically ask for things to be moved online. But this is specifically where I'm going to disagree with a lot of the actions taken by Ben and Lottie, because I think that we've got to realise, and students who are voting in this election should know, that whilst we are a students' union who are very, very powerful, we are still subject to the whims of what the university specifically want us to. And I think this is really, really important, and this is why we have to sort of not be too idealistic in what we're going for. And I think there are several things that we could have done specifically. First of all, I think it's really, really important to note that I think that I've got a lot of experience in this, because when we were writing the no detriment policy between second and third year, when I was faculty officer, I was part of the working group that worked with senior gold standard university executive staff to make that. And I think I understand the way in which they think and how they work, and I think that's really important moving forward. I think what's really, really important to note is that I think what is forgotten is that lots of different faculties have different ways of marking and assessing students. A lot of courses have accreditation. For example, the psychology degree has British Psychological Association accreditation, which requires them to do examinations, otherwise they cannot get that accreditation. I don't want to be put in a situation where I'm going to further the aims of what we believe, and then that means that loads of people don't get accreditation and they cannot work, for example, to be a psychologist. So I think there are several ways that we can go about this and be pragmatic and work with the university, because I think lobbying needs to be focused and realistic. I think one of the big things we could do in the summer is that the university has really good social distancing apparatus already set up around the university. There are lecture halls with stickers of green and red stickers set up and still there, just in case we go back into a pandemic. I think there are things that we can do, for example, have wide social distancing, but also use Jubilee Sports Hall and have like everyone spread out and stuff like that. But also, if examinations can be done online, asking the university whether they can do that. And I think for the summer exams, we need to start early, because university plan their exams early. That's one of the main reasons why the winter exams couldn't go back online. So I think it's really important to understand how the university operates, but also the only way to get the university to listen to us and for them to respect us as Students' Union is if we are realistic and work with them, because then over time they'll be more malleable to stuff that we would want. So going in hard and saying, look, we want it totally online, they're not going to listen to the next VP Education Democracy and won't want to work with them. And I think that's been a problem over the last couple of years.
Right down to Ryan.
Can I say I agree with all three candidates at the moment. I feel that the effort that Lottie and Ben took was good based on what the student response was, because 95% of students did say they wanted online exams or didn't want them in person, which is an overwhelming majority of people who voted. I mean, it was one of the fastest all-student votes that has been held by SUSU, so it was clearly something students were passionate about. However, I do agree with Path that going up full online was very unfeasible, because for those who don't know, I've been on, when I was school president, I was involved in the reforming of the biological sciences school program. So I know that it takes a lot of effort to go through the exams, so they have to go through an external board of examiners. That takes at least a month, and with about 2 weeks before the exams, it's very unlikely that they're going to have enough time to go through that same exam board, external exam board, to get approval for the exams. However, what I feel SUSU's act should have been, after, say, the second open letter, after it was clear that the university weren't going to change their mind, was making sure that the exam rooms were safe. As we saw in all the photos, all of the stories, they weren't fully safe. You saw crowds of people outside lecture theatres, and if you're going into an exam, the last thing you want to do during the middle of a pandemic is have anxiety about going in it, but surrounded by a load of people. And there should have been also alternative arrangements for if we did go back into lockdown. Omicron came out over the Christmas break, so the pandemic was ever-changing at that point, so there should have been a fail-safe if we couldn't have done in-person exams. But yeah.
Yeah, I basically agree with everyone, because I think it's hard not to. But I think one of the most important things to think about is flexibility, not just on courses, but also on the individual level. Because some courses absolutely need to be in person because of accreditation and those kind of things. But I'm a politics student, and I had 2 in-persons for no reason. And we weren't explained why. So I think if you are going to be flexible and be like, oh, we need to have some in-person exams, explain to the students why, because it felt like most students were left in the dark, and that just fueled resentment and confusion as to why the university wasn't listening to us. Because if I was told that my in-person exams were necessary, that would have been fine. But we were just told that they were safe and they had to go on, but there was actually no reason why I had to go in person. And I think also flexibility is really necessary on an individual student basis, because even if it is necessary to have an in-person exam, some students aren't actually going to be able to attend that. Like, I'm a student with a disability. I was lucky enough to get a smaller room, but even then, still no COVID restrictions are followed. All my requests and necessary things for exams weren't followed. I went into the room, no computers were on, like no one was wearing masks. It was just frankly embarrassing and really scary to go into a room as someone who has a health condition and feel completely and utterly put down by the university. And I think if the university instead focused on making sure that students at the beginning of the year and the midway of the year and before exams knew that there is possibilities to not have exams in person if they don't need them, and also a support in that process, because the university may have these systems in place, but it's very much like, oh, you need to do it as a student, and there's no help. And it's really hard as a disabled student to get things done when you're also worrying about exams and you're also worrying about revision. It's just a whole other thing on the students' plates, and the university needs to have more support with these other options in place, because they're not advertised and they're not made accessible for any students, and that's what should be key: accessibility in exams.
Well, more to that point, and kind of broadening out from the COVID issues particularly, we've talked a lot about support for students during exams. How do you, and I'm going to jump to Ryan for this first, how do you plan to improve student access to support during exams? We already have the More Than Your Studies campaign. Where do you want to continue that? Where do you see taking that? Do you want to introduce anything new? What are your plans?
Yeah, so it's actually one of my points in my manifesto is I want there to be more support throughout the entire year. So the You Are More Than Your Studies, I can't remember what it's called in WSA. It's portfolio, I think. But yeah, the You Are More Than Study events, they're really good during exams, because that's when a lot of people are under a lot of pressure. They need that time and that support there. But then again, there's also periods throughout the year when you're not in the middle of exam periods, but you've got a lot of coursework to do, or you're in the middle of labs or something like that. And I just feel like there should be more support events throughout the year. And I know in previous years, SUSU have introduced guide dogs, all of that through exam period. I don't think they should go to that level every week. I don't think we should be having guide dogs every week, as much as I'd love that. But I feel just offering something small, having a free screening of a film during Union Films or something like that, just to give the support needed for students. Okay.
To Polly, maybe?
Yeah, to add to that, I think having more support throughout the year is useful to promote students that the student union is there for them for those reasons, because I think it's quite hard to expect students to just start going to the student union for help if they haven't realised that the student union is there for that kind of help. So I'd definitely push the advice centre and also the wellbeing team and those kind of things, because the student hub is fantastic if you know what it's there for and if you know that they are happy 24/7 to talk to you. And I think if the student union and the wellbeing team are promoted properly as places you can get support and places you can ask for chill activities like hugging dogs, because everyone wants to hug a dog, then I think you're building that trust, and it's much easier for students in crisis to actually reach out. And I think that's the problem. Same with PATs, students are expected to reach out to people they've never met before, and they're expected to reach out to people they've seen online once. It's not, you don't want to go to someone you've never met and have a breakdown. That's not something that's you would find comfortable. I think it would only worsen it. So if we do push throughout the entire year, and hopefully for the future years, that from year one to the end of your university degree, the student union is here for you, not just for academics, but for your mental health. The wellbeing officers will always be happy to talk to you. There is these 24/7 support lines that we can also improve with the wellbeing team. And I just think consistency in our approach. We can't just be places that are there just for the exam season. That's just not feasible, because no one will trust us to help.
Yeah, support for assessments. One thing that I think that many people used beforehand, and now they've got rid of it, is end of module reports. Every staff member was required to write a report about their course, their program, what they did, their assessment type, how successful they thought that their program and the assessment type was. During COVID, that was cancelled, and it looks like they're not bringing it back. At least that's the impression that staff are under. And I found this was really useful to read when choosing modules, because I could see, oh, this assessment type is a poster. The staff say that they've decided to use a poster because of this. Students previously have got this in that assessment type. That information is so important for students to have, so they can make an informed choice about what module is going to be right for them. Second of all, as well, I think that as SABs, we are supposed to be student leaders, and so I would put the expectation of myself to be able to share information about how you can attain that kind of work-life balance that you see all over social media. Well, what does that actually look like? What are study skills that I can use? What resources are available? And have this from a wide variety of students as well. So students who are neurodiverse as well, the way that they approach their studies are going to be different from me, who's neurotypical, and having a wide variety of study skills, practical support that they can use during assessment time and out of assessment to be able to do the best that they can. So that's two ideas I have that would support students in assessments.
Support for assessments. I think, just to go back to Pat's briefly, I think that's definitely something that needs more moving forward in terms of, I know, in a similar way, sort of many people who would rather just go to a lecturer they know than go to their PAT to talk about the things that you're supposed to be able to easily discuss with the PATs. So they definitely, the training they receive needs to be looked at so that they are as accessible and approachable as possible. And then just with the course rep system, I think it needs to be better explained to people, sort of the advice and help that you can go to your representatives about and what they can tell you. And then thirdly, I think this is something that's quite inconsistent across the university, but the peer-to-peer mentoring or buddy schemes. I know of some departments where they sort of have these amazing schemes that have been running for years, and sort of the new students come in and they have like a buddy assigned. They go for a coffee. They can talk to them about all their previous experience the older students had and advise them about things. But then there's other departments where this just doesn't happen, or not enough people sign up, so no one ever gets to speak to anyone about it. So this needs to be better promoted and made consistent across the university to provide better support for assessments.
Yeah, we've spoken a little bit about this before, but I think it's really important, and I don't think a lot of students know this. The Student Hub was created recently. It's been rebranded and stuff like that, and I think it's very, very good. I think what a lot of people don't realise is that it was a big money-saving project, and they streamlined loads of projects and put it into this one-stop shop called the Student Hub, and taken away money from every single section of the university support. For example, enabling services is now part of Student Hub, but now has slashed funding from out of that. I think that is really important that a lot of students don't know about, the stuff that the university is specifically doing, that I think is which is not great. I think if you look at the SUSU strategy, which was in the first Senate report that was in November, I think there is a really big focus in there about the advice centre and the levelling up and increase of the sort of support that the advice centre is giving. I think it's really important because I don't think a lot of students know about the advice centre. It's like tucked away in building 40 up a set of stairs or whatever. And I think the sort of increased funding and support that the SUSU will be offering to the advice centre, part of the SUSU strategy, is really, really important to promote and get that started very, very quickly. But also I think there's a lot of stuff you can do in the You Are More Than. Like, the SUSU's already got a great track record of going to different hall sites and stuff like that. I think you can do that with the advice centre and try and find confidential rooms and stuff like that, and try to get more support for students who may find it intimidating or something to go to certain places and things like that. And I just echo what everyone else has really said. I think there's a lot of stuff that SUSU can do, and I think that is the main thing. But I think it's really, really important for us to also lobby the university and tell us and be transparent about the things that it's doing, especially with the student hub, because a lot of students are like, woo, student hub, and they do a really good job, but a lot of money has been slashed out of that. So I think it's really, really important.
So we've talked a lot about education, but the role is education and democracy. So let's talk a little bit about the democratic process and the things that actually happen in SUSU in that regard. So I'm going to jump to Jamie for this and ask, what area of student life do you feel that democracy currently isn't covering adequately and that you think you could improve on?
There are definitely groups here that are underrepresented within the university. There are, I think, in my manifesto I talk about there should be the creation of the role of a minor officer for students that study minors, because while this is something that it was only relatively recently that they started running minor programs here, but it's something that's not particularly well promoted, and then students that do take the minors, it's sort of a leap into the unknown really, and it's hard to find other people who are doing the same program as you. So it would be great to have a representative within the union that you can talk to about this and go to with problems specific to this, because often another area that with the PATs, if you go to talk to your PAT about your minor program, they don't know anything about it. Many staff don't. So that would be one area that would be good too. I think while there is a disabilities officer currently, I think this is something that really needs to be expanded really. It's almost not enough just to have one officer for this. It's such a big area. And a lot of the areas really in that sense are like the women officer. They're like, it's one person to represent such large groups, and it's difficult really to truly represent all the students within such large sections of the student population. And so it would while it might not be possible, it would be really great to have more reps representing sort of specific aspects of the population rather than just sort of for each course and for each year group within the course.
I think my manifesto point about #RealStudentStory speaks to this. I kind of got the question, how is a hashtag democracy? Like, how does that relate at all? But what the hashtag or the campaign is about is putting a human story to student experience. Politics isn't just policies, it's about people, and about when you're making change and you're thinking about revamping programs and you're thinking about assessments and you're making those decisions, it's helpful to have a real person that you're thinking about, like how are they going to be impacted by the decisions I'm making in this room. And when you start thinking of the disabled students, the students, first generation students, and you start grouping them together and not treating them as people who are diverse, even though they're part of those categories, that, it opens a door for stereotyping, it opens a door for people making decisions that aren't actually informed. So, this video campaign is about creating, bringing to the surface people's stories and people's actual experiences studying here at the university as a new way of student voice and a new way of student representation.
So similar to Jamie, in my manifesto, I'm heavily promoting the idea of more inclusivity of groups that are neglected. So a lot of my focus is on postgrads, gender neutral students, areas where there's not necessarily as much representation by the students' union at the moment. So a lot of what I've done as faculty officer and throughout my time at uni has been trying to promote these areas. So that's definitely something I want to continue bringing forward to SUSU. Just having the opportunity to have more officers to kind of represent these students. And like Jamie said, there's courses where there's no representation. So minors, dual honours is another one. It's just getting that sense of inclusivity for everyone and making sure that everyone has someone who can stand up for them. That's what one of the big things I want to achieve is.
Yeah, so I think we have women's officers, we have BME officers, we have disabled officers, but there isn't actually any awareness of this within the student population. Most people don't know who these people are or what they're there for. And I think one of the big problems with that is awareness. Like, these officers aren't allowed to have Instagrams, they're not allowed to push their name out. It's how are students expected to know who they are, and how are they expected to represent students without people being aware who they are and going to talk to them, and then being able to push out massive emails being like, oh, talk to me about your problems. Because one disability officer could be really good if they had the resources behind them, if they had the people talking to them and letting them know, because otherwise it would just become oh, this is my experience, so it must be everyone else's kind of thing, which isn't real. And I think it's especially problematic with a BME officer, because you can't categorize your entire student experience just by one person's opinions. Like, the BME isn't just one community, it's multiple, and there's only so much you can do by having these officers talk to societies and those kind of things. They need to be able to promote themselves as students. Why are we allowed to have Instagrams and they're not? It's one of the big thing there. And I think also with course representatives, SSLCs are a really great opportunity to talk to your students and put your students' opinions up to teachers and lecturers in your departments and so on and so forth. But joint honour students aren't allowed at SSLCs. So as a politics department, we have an SSLC, but joint honour students can't come. And I've had to actually push an email throughout and make sure that they can attend, because it's their modules and it's their courses. And I think having a uniformity where there has to be a representative, or at least there has to be an invite for a representative of these joint honours courses, because we have tons of joint honours courses and they should have an equal amount of say on the modules that they're taking than the full honours courses. And I just think there's just a lot of it's really difficult for students to get represented when their representative can't do anything. And I think that's the problem. Like, women's officers and BME officers and LGBT officers, they're doing their best job, but they aren't being allowed to properly represent because they're not being given the tools by the student union. So that's one of the things I would definitely prioritize, is make sure that the marketing team works with these students and these officers, so that people know who they are and people know where to go for help, because it's impossible to represent when people don't know who you are.
Is the one we missed out?
Yeah, actually speaking to the democracy side, I think one of my manifesto points is about looking at the way we do democratic processes in the SUSU. So 3 main things: the You Make Change, the petitions, and I think the all-student votes. I think what is really, really important to note is that a lot of times in elections, we get union presidents elected on 900 votes, 1,500, 2,500, and for a student population of 25,000, that's not really great, is it? And I think one of the main things that I think with the university and them making them listen to stuff like the You Make Changes and petitions and stuff, like we've had problems with the January exams, is I think it's important to ask the university in meetings what they think really should we be seeing, what processes should we do, because actually a lot of the university stuff is also decided by democratic processes, and I think as professionals, I think there's a lot of stuff that we can learn from them about how we could specifically implement those processes. But also I think the advertising and the way we look at You Make Change and all student votes and stuff could be platformed much better. At the moment, I think it's just a SUSU website, an email, and perhaps a sabbatical officer sharing on Facebook. There is a petition or a You Make Change going on, then which garners 100 votes or something like that. There's got to be things that we've got to change. And finally, what I want to say is that at my time at university, one of the VP educations that I really looked up to is someone called Sam Deadman. And I think what he did really, really well, and the thing we've got rid of, and I don't know why, is creating working groups for different sorts of students. So there used to be a joint honours working group, which I used to sit on as a joint honours undergraduate student, which got completely just vanished into thin air, and postgraduate taught and postgraduate research working groups. A lot of times the university actually respects those working groups because they can sit on them as well as students. I think it's really important to have that cross-bridge connection, because then they'll listen to certain things as well. A lot of academic staff and senior staff are actually happy to sit on those as well because they really want to know themselves. So I think it's also about bridging the gap, and I think that I would be very good at doing that because I've had experience sitting on loads of working groups as well.
So we've got time for just one more question. It's quite a big one, but we might have to sort of keep it a little bit shorter than some of the other ones. But one group we haven't necessarily talked about, Parth just alluded to it there, is postgraduate students. And, they're a huge group that often, I think, can get forgotten by, kind of the wider people, voting in the election. So we'll start with Parth, we'll work our way down to finish. But what plans do you have to support postgraduates and their particular problems they face?
Yeah. So I think over loads of election cycles, people have just put postgraduate in their manifesto, and I think there's got to be some tangible things that you're willing to do, which I think improves postgraduate. So one of the main things I want to do is that what I talked about already, just establishing the working groups, because I think it's really, really important to establish that bridge as well. I think what is really, really important as well is that course representative training and school president and department president training is very, very undergraduate specific. I think we need to develop course rep and school president training that is specifically postgraduate focused as well, because I have a lot of course reps that come up to me when I was faculty officer, loads of school presidents who's like, I don't know how to answer this postgraduate student's question, and I think that was really, really that's not great. Second of all, we used to trial out doing postgraduate research faculty officers a couple of years ago. One of our main things to do, I think is really, really important, is having postgraduate champions and stuff like that that are faculty specific, because those are easier to try and get people to run for those, but also probably know quite a lot, because the connection with postgraduates per faculty seems to be more streamlined than it is disconnected between schools and departments. So I think that's really, really important. And finally, I think that when I used to be faculty officer and I sat on faculty education committee, I was liaised with the doctoral college quite a lot. I've got connections within those, and I think that it's really important to talk to them, because that's the easiest way to get to postgraduate research students, which a lot of the students who run in elections probably don't talk to, because often they can't really run for sabbatical officer roles, because it's very hard for them to take away starting from their PhD or MPhil or whatever. So those are my specific points.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. The postgraduates need to be better integrated into the current systems, and the course reps that are there already need to have better training that allows them to deal equally with undergrads and postgrads, because they represent such a large part of the student body. So it's really not good enough that they're not supported as well. And then just for the roles, the representative roles that are available to postgrads that are obviously very important that they're filled, these need to be much better advertised to explain why they should get involved and how it would be helpful to their peers, and just sort of the benefits and advantages of getting involved with that, and sort of make them feel more included and welcome so that they want to do that.
One of my manifesto points is about increasing scholarships for disadvantaged students in respect to postgraduate education, because I think there's this overwhelming belief that postgraduate education is incredibly expensive and inaccessible for some students. And if we want to be, a leading research university, we should have students from all kinds of experiences and backgrounds able to access these courses and able to work on these programs. So I would start off with a postgraduate working group to talk about their financial situation, and be really open with them and see how how the university could contribute and make sure that more students have access to it. As well as that, establishing kind of a network for postgraduate research students, especially the research students who aren't on taught modules. Often the PhD route is kind of called a very lonely path, because it's kind of just you and your research, but actually creating a network would kind of strengthen the research that we do here, because an interdisciplinary approach is I think we can all agree, the best approach for a leading, innovating university. And there's this new campaign that the university are doing. I don't know whether you've seen that, we have kind of world-changing degrees, but it's how can we have world-changing degrees if we're not able to actually change the programs and the systems that we're part of? And I think postgraduate students are able to lead in that respect because they're the ones, creating the research for tomorrow.
So like several of the other candidates, postgraduates are mentioned in my manifesto. They're the number one top priority because they make up, I believe it's a third of students in the entire university, and the amount of representation they get at the moment is very lackluster. So it's definitely something I really want to improve on. So similar to Path, I want to see more of these changes that are implemented that appeal to what postgraduate students want. But also one of the points that I make in my manifesto, which Lottie has just recently introduced, I think last week, was the introduction of drop-in sessions that postgraduates can attend to say, look, this is what I'm having issues with, like I'm having problems with funding or whatever, and just having that availability to be able to make myself available to hear what the concerns are, because it's okay me saying students want postgraduate students want more funding or more events or whatever, but allowing students to actually come to me directly through those kind of drop-in sessions would be a great way for me to determine what students actually want rather than coming up with what I think students want. And one other thing I want to do is to make sure there's more in the terms of events that are for postgraduate students. So a lot of the events that postgraduate students have at the moment are very more mature student focused, whereas that might not appeal to everyone, same as it might not also appeal to undergraduates for more young adult situations. But yeah, that's something I want to work on as well.
Yeah, I think everyone has amazing ideas, and we definitely need working groups that are there to collect feedback. And one of my key policy points is streamlining feedback, because it's really difficult to have feedback from students, because most of the time it's just having an email to a lecturer being like, oh, my course isn't teaching me well. I don't feel like I'm getting enough support during my research and those kind of things. And having a system where it could be anonymous if you wanted it to be, I think would be really helpful to collect that feedback from postgraduate students. And also like implementing a role within the student union that is just postgraduate focused and has expertise and has the time and the resources really, because I don't want like any student officers which are volunteer roles to not be as well resourced as we are as future sabbaticals. And I just think it's really difficult to implement anything when we're already like, we have experiences. I'm an undergrad student, so I only have personal experience with that. I would want someone who is right front and center in the student union working for postgraduates, that we advertise fully and we make sure that postgraduate students know they're there for drop-in sessions and know that we can talk to us and we can guide. And I just think there needs to be awareness that postgraduate students are welcome in the student union and they're welcome to be representatives. And I just think if you work from the top, then more people will talk to their course representatives or actually run for the course representative roles, because most of my postgraduate taught students don't have any course representatives, and that's just not okay. And how are we supposed to get feedback if we don't have representation? And I just think that's the thing. If we don't have course representatives, we need to have a strong central representative that postgraduates feel comfortable to talk to.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been a really good discussion and hopefully been very helpful for people watching to get to know a little bit more about you. So yeah, thank you very much for watching Meet the Candidates. I've been Peter Kirk for Surge Media. Thank you.